2011, when the United States withdrew from Iraq, the problem wasn't so much that we withdrew the troops in and of itself, because those troops were actually training behind the scenes. It was what that removal of troops did for our influence in Baghdad. Because what it did is it meant that the Iraqi politicians there, instead of being able to say, actually, I'm going to do the right thing for the country in terms of trying to make deals that empower Sunnis, that create consensus, they simply had no choice except to do what the Iranians wanted, or to do what groups like the Islamic State or more fringe Sunni jihadist groups wanted, because the Iranians would say to them, don't do this, you're going to die. And the jihadists would say, don't do this and you're going to die. And America, that balancing power of influence, kept things together. And you see around the world now, with the disinterest of this administration, what is happening. But again, the optimism is there. You see this with the French. You know, there is a behind the scenes, a big effort now at seeking American leadership.
Well said, Tom. And Waleed, of course, what Tom is talking about, so many people have been talking about in the wake and in the aftermath of these attacks that took place in Paris, France on Friday. Where is the leadership of the United States? And it must show its leadership, and it must be strong. And I think Tom made a very good statement about when your big brother is there, you know, you feel good about and confident what you're doing. But Paris, France reacting on it, well, France acting on its own, conducting its airstrikes, United States also helping in that. And of course, we've seen that Russia is now doing the same thing, because it became very clear to the Russians that the United States and the UK was right, that a bomb did bring down the Russian Metrojet that was flying over the Sinai Peninsula, leaving Sharm el-Sheikh to take people back to Russia. And as a result of that, Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has vowed to retaliate and definitely find the terrorist responsible for that. You're looking at video of that from November 1. Let's go back to the pictures right now that we're getting back from Paris, France. For those of you just tuning in, you're looking at the neighborhood of Saint-Denis, which is near the stadium, which came under attack on Friday in Paris, France. Now, what we're told is that police have been able to move in, and they're looking for people who are still connected to, or may have aided and abetted, or even carried out some of the terrorist attacks that took place on Friday. And Waleed, it looks like that they are assembling again, and things appear to be calm now. Earlier we heard a lot of explosions, a lot of gunfire. We're seeing the picture pull out now. We can see an entire view of what they're experiencing in this neighborhood. So it seems that there's been some calm now, that we don't hear the activity that we had before. What might this indicate to you, Waleed?
Well, you're just posting now we're reading it on the news input that a number of officers have been wounded. So a number of officers, that means that this is an engagement, a wide engagement. What we don't know is the operation actually ended. Is it a standoff, meaning it's a kind of a ceasefire, a negotiation? Are the individual or many individuals still hold inside that apartment? That we don't know.
Well, Waleed, let me just interrupt with you. We are getting it now. The French TV is basically stating that the French suspects are still holed up in an apartment, having been in a situation where you cover these kinds of things, as I've done in the past. When police are gathered around like that, it's like they're assembling and getting ready to find out how they can best go in to pursue those particular people without bringing any loss of life, collateral damage. They want to target that. If they are held up in that particular place, the police will find ways to either wait them out or to go in and take them out.
That is exactly what we were trying to discuss almost half an hour ago.
Exactly.
If those armed individuals are inside the location, they shot and wounded police officers. What you can see now from the various footages that you've shown is there is an outside circle with roadblocks that protects the operation that is ongoing on the inside. We don't have a feed from the inside. What we have a feed now is that a large circle that is blocking off the area where the operation is taking place. And if the French TV is now saying that, you know, they are inside an apartment and there is something about to happen, then it's going to be for some time.
Yeah, we may be here for a while, depending on how long it takes to to bring this under situation. There was some unsettling news that came out of Paris, France earlier before all of this actually started happening, Waleed, and we talked about that before. The unsettling news out of Paris was that a second attacker got away following last Friday's carnage, and then a massive manhunt ensued, and we're seeing some of that right now, how it has come full circle now to Saint-Denis, and we can see that looks like an ambulance moving in and other police coming in. And then, of course, we also know they're looking for Salah Abdel Salam, whom French police accidentally permitted to cross into Belgium on Saturday. One of his brothers going so far as to blow himself up in Paris rather than to be taken into custody. So here we are live, and we're watching this entire situation unfold as we stick with it. Police have to be very careful, of course, because there could be hostages involved. We don't know all the details yet. We're still waiting to get that. We can see that they're moving in with, you can see that they're using shields to protect themselves, and of course a car moving in, a police vehicle moving in and blocking our shot there, Waleed. But apparently we just saw a couple of officers armed and ready, but also using their shields to move in as we just watch this for a little bit to see what they're doing. Are they leaving or are they going in? I really can't make heads or tails of that since I'm not on the ground there. Our own Steve Harrigan, who's been reporting there and talked to us earlier today, this evening, told us that people have been told to stay inside their homes. So that would indicate, Wally, that people are still in that community.
Well, I have a question. I don't know where we're going to get the answer to, but that would be important. Are agencies out of France reporting that there is one armed man or more? Because if you have more, then the capacity to sustain attacks by the police or an operation will be more complicated, more difficult in this case.
Yeah, well, I don't have the answers to that, Waleed, but we will get them. But the police were definitely armed in what appears to be riot gear. They had their shields, and that would indicate that they might be planning to go in. As I said, they could either wait it out or take them out, and we will just have to wait and see. And 3 officers have been wounded, shot and wounded. We're still waiting to get more details. That might change. It's a very fluid situation for those of you who are just coming in to seeing what we're doing right now. And I will bring you up to date on this. We are looking at video from the Saint-Denis neighborhood of Paris, France, where police officers at this hour have been involved in a gun battle. We heard explosions, we heard machine gun fire, we had heavy fire coming from this neighborhood between police and whoever was exchanging that gunfire with them. We know that the police have been searching for suspects related to the attacks, the terrorist attacks that took place on Friday, killing upwards of 130 people, wounding 352 people. People were just minding their own business. People who went to a football game. The French president was there at that stadium when the attacks started. And then people at cafes having a good time, and at the Bataclan enjoying a concert, and being indiscriminately taken out by 8 cowardly men who went in there with rifles and began shooting them. So Waleed, when we look at the cowardice of these kinds of actions, I go back to what Tom Rogan said earlier, one of our security experts, and he said that what we have is the ability to stand up against ISIS because our values are greater.
So the determination, it's very important what Tom said about determination. The jihadists and their allies have operated on the assumption that they are right, that their ideology is right, and their ideologues tell them that the more you go forward and the more you actually strike, the more you're going to see a retreat on behalf of your enemies, whom they call the infidels and kafirs or what have you. So really, in the war of ideas, first thing you do among your own population is to show determination and strength. Second, you're going to also go into the population that is being abused by the other side, where the other side, meaning ISIS, are trying to recruit from, and get allies. You really need to have religious clerics, NGOs, and other groups standing up and do what the Tunisians have done, what the Egyptians have done, they rose against these fundamentalists in 2013 and in 2014. So we need to have this kind of alliance between our liberal democracies and the forces for democracy within these societies and go on the offensive, not to be on the retreat, basically, as we have done over the past few years.
Wally, pardon my pause there. We were going to a 5-second delay there, so I apologize for not responding to you immediately, but you're right. And we're just getting some fresh information now that the deputy mayor of Paris is telling residents in the neighborhood of Saint-Denis to understand that they should stay indoors. This is not an attack, but a police intervention. That says a lot. So now we know for sure that the police are moving in, as we've seen. They're setting up, and they are prepared to, as I said, either wait them out or take them out, Waleed.
Yes, I mean, that confirms a little bit more what we were concerned about over the past 40 minutes. Now, this is what French call, not us, French authorities, French media call sensitive areas, meaning areas where the jihadists try to count on the sympathies of bands of people, of elements and radicals and what have you. But the French government, it looks like, is determined to go in. This is something they have not done in the past. They have not mobilized that kind of military force and security force to go into sensitive areas. And to me, that's very important, regardless of the outcome of this specific operation. This is the French state, the French government, reclaiming security in those areas under the auspices of trying to find those suspects, try to extract them. So we don't know how this is going to end. It looks like it's not going to end very, very, very well because of the possibility that a clash would occur, and those armed elements are not most likely going to surrender if they are sympathizers of ISIS.
Well, as we know, the brother of Salah Abdel Salam, who is someone that they definitely want to get because they know he's directly tied to it, and he got away from them going into Belgium. For all we know, he could have actually returned to the scene of Saint-Denis, since this is a neighborhood that, as we've talked about before, Waleed, is a stronghold for people with sympathies towards ISIS and believe in violent jihad. And as a result of that, you were mentioning earlier how these kinds of neighborhoods, or the people living in these neighborhoods, some of them they want police to come into those neighborhoods. Perhaps they believe that they're set up to cause or inflict some violence on the very security forces that are designed to protect the people of Paris, France.
Well, let me be very, very careful about the wording of this, because we've had in the past misinterpretation. These are suburbs, like all suburbs in all cities in Europe. But those specific suburbs have witnessed in 2005, and we saw it, the burning of thousands and thousands of cars at the hands of networks and bands of people and youth, what the French called the les jeunes, violent youth, so on and so forth. That is one problem, social problem. Now, the radicals, the jihadists, in those neighborhoods, what they're trying to do is provoke a social clash, an urban clash. That is not to say that the neighborhoods are supportive of ISIS. No. An overwhelming majority is against the terrorists. But the terrorists or the jihadists would like to see more police going in, would like to stretch it in time, exchange of fire, hoping that this would trigger a reaction by these violent youth. That is the equation that I see.
Waleed, just getting some more information while you were talking, and you're absolutely right. The updated information we're getting now, Waleed, is that schools will not open, and this is an area of pedestrian shops and cafes, pedestrian shops, and so we're seeing that this is a complete shutdown now, and people are getting it very clear and very serious that they must stay indoors so that police can go ahead and make this intervention. So as you stated, it could be, we could see some violence unfold again. We've already heard the gunfire previous to that, and we have a calm. It could be a calm before another storm of violence.
It could be. I mean, the structure of the equation that we see is now clearer than before. This was an operation by police and security forces to inquire about individuals. Most likely, and we will know later, they were shot at. They responded. I am still wondering about the explosions. Were these explosives used by authorities to open gates or doors, or were these explosives or hand grenades, thrown on them? We don't know. But when you hear explosives and then exchange of fire, it means that there is a fight, a battle. And when you know from French TV and from French authorities that there is a barricaded unit or one or two persons withstanding those attacks, then you know it's going to take some time.
Well, Waleed, you make a very good point, and I want to get to the heart of this. We know that ISIS has taken credit and claimed this responsibility for these attacks that took place in Paris, France on Friday. We also know that there's a video that came out of ISIS basically threatening to cause more damage in Paris, France, as well as to take out attacks on other Western markets or targets such as the UK and most notably America, Washington, D.C. Congressman Peter King, who's on our Intelligence Services Committee here in the United States, in our United States Congress, has gone on record as saying we are the #1 target. Having said that, what should be the posture of people here in America and in terms of making sure that we have the preparation to be sure that we are protecting ourselves? We know that Police Commissioner William Bratton here in New York City, he knows that they have rolled out a new counterterrorism apparatus of the police department, and they're on guard 24/7 to ensure the safety of the people here. But it goes back to what we've said all along. We have to be right 100% of the time. A terrorist can just get lucky one time.
True. Well, the most important, in my view, after 15 years of monitoring how societies respond to terrorism, is that the public needs to be made aware of the kind of threats. Why? Because we have law enforcement. They're doing their job. The FBI is doing a great job going after, 50 potential threats in 50 states. So is the Homeland Security and our military as well. But if the public is engaged, it will multiply all our resources by 100, by 1,000. You know, the slogan, if you see something,
say something.
Say something. That is huge, because most of these conspiracies we've disrupted, I don't want to say most, but large segment of them was due in the beginning to a citizen who saw something, who heard something, and then reported and engaged.
And perhaps that is the case. Perhaps that is a case of what we're seeing in Saint-Denis neighborhood, and we're going to go there directly right now. Waleed, I'd like you to stay with us throughout the night. I know it's been a long night for you. It's a long night for me, but we want to see what happens here and watch as it develops. We're hoping for a good outcome. Steve Harrigan is reporting now from the Saint-Denis neighborhood, or at least nearby in Paris, France. Steve, what are you seeing there?
Kelly, we're in central Paris right now, and we can report that there has been a gun battle going on in the Saint-Denis neighborhood just north of Paris on the northern edge for the past 2 hours. There's been one police officer slightly wounded. People around that neighborhood have been told to stay inside their houses. There are elite police units there, a very heavy police presence, and there has been heavy gunfire as well, SWAT teams involved. There are several people holed up or barricaded inside an apartment. Now, keep in mind, this is all happening when there is a major manhunt underway. More than 100,000 French police and military have been mobilized to try and search for 2 suspects from the Friday killings who are still at large. We're not sure whether the people holed up in that apartment are those suspects or what the exact connection is. But what we are seeing is a major battle with elite units and at least 2 people still barricaded inside an apartment as this operation continues to unfold. Kelly.
Steve, we've been watching the developments, and thank you for your reporting, by the way. Do you know if any people, are there any hostages? Have you heard anything like that?
We don't know the situation inside that room. We do know that police have it surrounded. They've blocked traffic. They've shut down public transportation, so whoever is in there is not getting out. We've heard reports of 2, 3, or more men, so we can't exactly be sure about that situation. But the gunfire has gone on now for about 2 hours. 1 police officer lightly wounded. French media is saying there is a connection to the hunt for the two suspects in the mass killings on Friday, but whether they are planners, whether they are the two suspects, or the exact connection, still not clear as this gun battle continues to unfold, Kelly.
And Steve, I was going to ask you, you said it was one police officer shot and wounded. We had heard some other reports that there were 2 or 3 police officers shot and wounded. I'm glad you're able to bring us updates on that. And of course, that could change as the night goes on.
Certainly these numbers and the information really changes. We just have to proceed step by step with exactly what we know. But certainly for a country and a city really on edge, where you've seen people run in panic at the sound of firecrackers, this real live time gunfight is certainly going to put people on edge again.
It will put people on edge. I know I talked to you earlier and we spoke about the fact that with people being on edge, I was asking you, is there a chance of them getting back to normal? And as you aptly said and rightly said, it's going to take some time.
I think it's a long way away. I think the nature of these attacks was just so shocking and so startling to people. The president called it an attack on our children, and that's really who it was. Most of the victims under age 30, and just shot as they were taking part in French culture, in listening to music, in dining, in going out at night. And the randomness of it all has really stunned people like no previous attack has, Kelly.
Steve, this neighborhood that we're talking about, Saint-Denis, can you tell us what it's like? We understand it has pedestrian shops. It's a nice area, but it is a suburb. And Waleed Ferris and I were talking earlier, along with Tom Rogan, both security experts. They were saying these neighborhoods also have some sympathizers to ISIS and violence in terms of jihadi movements. You were talking about the 2005 riots that unfolded, Waleed, as well. So what kind of neighborhood is it?
Well, certainly France has had its problems, especially on the outskirts of the major cities where you have massive apartment complexes and disaffected Muslim youth. They have had riots, especially serious in 2005, where there were several $100 million worth of damage. You might remember some of the videos, some of the scenes of the cars being set on fire. Certainly has had its problems in the past. So some of these areas particularly dangerous for police to work in and to patrol. That's why a shooting in this area is not automatically necessarily tied to the current situation and the current manhunt. But right now, at least, French media, French television saying there is a connection. But the exact nature of who is barricaded inside that apartment building, how many people, still not clear as this siege operation continues, Kelly.
Well, Steve, as you continue to follow the developments there, I want to bring in Waleed again. And Waleed, this is exactly what we were talking about. And Steve bringing confirmation from on the ground there in Paris, France. And certainly we know that the police are trying to do all that they can, as well as security forces trying to do all that they can. You had spoken earlier about here in America, we have this slogan of if you see something, say something. I'm going to get back to Steve in just a moment, but Waleed, is that likely the case here in Paris, France, where people began to see something and started saying something so that they don't have to endure another terrorist attack?
Well, let me begin by saying that Steve is right, absolutely right. There will be one outcome of this operation at this point in time. It's overwhelming French security presence surrounding 1, 2, even 3 or 4. We know what the outcome is going to be. The concern is going to be, will this lead to other incidents or not? We will see. It's too early to judge. Now, answering your question, you know, the whole world, and we're part of it right now, we are watching in that city of light in Paris, scenarios that could unfold elsewhere, from Sydney to Toronto to London, Stockholm, Washington, Los Angeles, and New York. We are looking at a possibility of a future scenarios because the jihadis who have perpetrated the massacre a few days ago, and if possibly 2 or 3 of them, possibly, we don't know, are surrounded, this is urban clash. This is something we have to learn from. So you're right. The public needs to be made aware, to be educated about these issues. That would make a major difference.
Steve, I'm going to come back to you. I know you're trying to gather information. I don't want to detain you from that, but again, if you could just give us a concept of what the mood is like once again. I want people to understand that this is a very difficult situation for police. They have to be very careful. They don't want to have any collateral damage. So what's the mood and atmosphere like? Is this a police-controlled situation right now? All right, we're having some difficulty with Steve right there, but Walid, we again, as we're looking at the video here from Saint-Denis in Paris, France, a suburb of Paris, France, we can see the police definitely have this place locked down. And as Steve had reported earlier, they have 2, possibly 3 men in one particular area, and they will, like I said earlier, wait them out, or they'll actually try to find a way of going in. Steve has again reported there's been explosions and heavy gunfire, as we heard earlier. So, Walid, as we continue to watch this situation unfold, you talked about how this is a global situation, and it is a global war on terror. And we have to be vigilant 24/7 now, no matter where we live. As we know, there was a threat in Germany. There was a threat in other countries, but Germany in particular received a threat. The United States has received a threat via video, although there's no credible action going on right now, according to Jay Johnson of Homeland Security. But nevertheless, our police and our security teams, our FBI, they are not taking any chances. As we heard from the FBI director, James Comey, a couple of days ago, he said, look, there are at least 900 cases that we're following right now related to ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism. So our work is ahead of us, and we, the people, the American people, have to become mindful of that fact.
Yes, absolutely. We can make a major difference just by being informed, first by our government, and of course, as we're doing right now, through our media. But hopefully more NGOs would engage in educating the public about the depths of the threat. It's not just police incidents. This is not fight with the mafia. This is a worldwide jihadi network. And the American public, the Canadian public,
can I just
public,
I can't let that point go without bringing up this question. You stated that well. This is not a crime battle. This is not a fight against the mafia. This is a fight against an enemy of our values that wants to attack us and leave us dead.
Yeah, this is the life or death of not just individuals, but of societies, of a way of life. This is equivalent to the fight for independence of nations. That is the dimension, because it's not how the jihadists see it. I mean, people have to really understand what these videos are talking about. It's not just the violence, the blood. The words are sometimes more powerful, and they are being indoctrinated. These thousands of people in Syria and Iraq, of course, around the world, in Nigeria, but now in the West. I mean, we have not seen those numbers in 2005 and 6. Now we see thousands of them. The French government knows that after this operation is over, after the dismantling of the cells that perpetrated the crime of the massacre of last week, they know they have to deal with those hundreds, if not thousands, of French citizens born in France, went to Syria and Iraq and back, and they could engage in what we see right now, but time 10, time 20. That's the real challenge.
And the real, what's disturbing about this is the fact that they've been able to get to so many young people through online rooms, that the dark side of the internet. We're still trying to figure out, or police are still trying to figure out how they are communicating. So the challenge is still very difficult because of the technology that ISIS has been able to take control of and use to get those who are disaffected and those who are angry for whatever reason, and turn those young men and those young women into weapons of destruction.
Absolutely. I mean, the problem, jihadists, they feel confident. They are like the other totalitarians. If you don't respond to these ideas, then they're going to continue to radicalize others. Look at what happened in Egypt and in Tunisia. Let's take examples from the Arab and Muslim world. They actually responded. Civil society responded to the Muslim Brotherhood, responded to the Salafis. And that's how millions of people started to march on the streets of Cairo. And they got rid of what they believe is a machine of radicalization. In the West, we are not responding. Unfortunately, our government, including our administration, have ignored the ideological battle. And I think now the public is going to take on ideologically.
Well, you know, Waleed, a lot of people listening to you would agree with you, but yet, as you've mentioned, the leadership of our own government has failed to call this what it is. And we've had general after general after general, terror expert after terror expert say this is an ideological battle. This is not a crime syndicate. This is an agency of doom, an agency of death, a terror group that means to do free-thinking, freedom-loving people harm. And you've stated it very clearly, as well as Tom Rogan, who was on with us earlier. But he went on to say that our values that we hold dear. I'm looking at some video right now. Well, everything seems to be fine. It was just a camera angle. But our values must be spoken of, must be adhered to, and we must not allow anyone to take that away from us.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. The problem and the irony is that even if officials or politicians or leaders ignore the ideological dimension, right? Because of social media, this is impossible at this point in time. I mean, citizens and younger citizens, I'm talking about even teenagers, when they go online and hear what the jihadists have to say, then they come on TV and listen to decision makers and politicians tell them, oh, there are no ideology. And they're doing what ISIS is saying on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. You're creating a wedge between your elite that does not want to engage ideologically, and then a majority of your youth, of your people, who know that this is an ideological problem.
We're getting some more updates right now, Waleed. That's why I was just pausing for a moment. But we are told that one newspaper, we want to make sure that we get some independent confirmation of this, but we're being told that The Guardian is reporting that they were in search of this Saint-Denis neighborhood for the Mastermind, which would be Abdel Hamid, I forgot how to pronounce his last name, Abaoud. We want to continue to make sure we have some confirmation on that, but that is being reported that perhaps the Mastermind was there. We have Steve Harrigan on the scene there. He's probably doing his fact-finding right now, and we still don't know who they're looking for. So I want to make that very clear, but that is a report that we are now getting, a published report. We will wait till we get some independent confirmation. Again, this is unconfirmed, that they will possibly be looking for the mastermind of these terrorist attacks. And there was some early reporting that he had gone back to Syria, but no one could confirm that either. So it appears that the intelligence apparatus of the security teams there working in Paris, France, or all of France, are actually working and interconnecting, as you know, with the UK, the United States, as well as Israel, all of the intelligence services being brought to bear, and perhaps even Russia. We know that airstrikes are being conducted by France, Russia, and the United States on Raqqa, Syria. So are we seeing that the communication now and the information sharing is now taking place? Because that's important, but it's important that it's being done on a global level. We may have lost Waleed Fares for a moment, but we're going to go to Benjamin Collins, former Green Beret. Benjamin, thanks for joining us this morning. You've been following the developments, no doubt, and as a former Green Beret, and you're looking at the police and security forces there in the neighborhood of Saint-Denis. How do you describe this? Intelligence sharing, and as a result of intelligence sharing, finding out where the targets are and then going in to try to take them out or bring them to justice?
Yeah, Kelly, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think what this attack in Paris a couple of days ago did was bring to the forefront the ability and the necessity for the intelligence services in the U.S. and the U.K. and the European, certainly Belgium, because Belgium has a huge problem with this, to bring them together in a way that they're able to really share now in real time. We have capabilities that they don't. They have local capabilities that we don't. So, to be honest, I think they're probably, have been, either using signals intelligence, so tracking phones, Maybe they got phones off some of the dead bodies, and they were able to kind of track their call history or text history. You know, it's most likely some electronic form of tracking that they're doing.
That's very good because, yeah, that's very good that you pointed that out, Ben, because as you know, well, police look for everything, and when dead bodies are there, they're part of the evidence. And dead terrorists leave evidence. They also leave a treasure trove of information, as we saw in the case of Osama bin Laden when he was taken out in Pakistan, and just a treasure trove of information that gave us insights as to how Al-Qaeda conducts itself. But this isn't Al-Qaeda. We're talking about Al-Qaeda on steroids, and that's ISIS. And while they may be bragging that they did something really large in terms of attacking Paris, France, they have also put a marker on themselves, and actually they are now being served notice.
You know, they have, and I think, Kelly, it's important to realize that, you know, and I think on Fox have probably walked myself into this as well sometimes in commentary is the classic what you hear from you know from a lot of us is, you know, that regional, you know, that ISIS had a very regional goal, right? It was to build this caliphate and starting in Iraq and Syria. And Al-Qaeda, you know, had kind of the traditional anti-West. Al-Qaeda was the more mature, could plan, et cetera. I think what we've seen is a function of, you know, as ISIS brand has kind of risen into the ascendancy and Al-Qaeda has not. I think we've probably seen a lot of the, you know, the core Al-Qaeda and a lot of the expertise, a lot of the probably smuggling routes, a lot of the logistics arm that Al-Qaeda has almost rebranded into ISIS. Because, you know, I'll tell you, you know, one of the things that struck me with what occurred a couple of days ago, which we found out the type of explosives that were used in the suicide vest was something called TATP, which is you can literally buy this stuff at a feed store and Home Depot and make it in your tub. As a matter of fact, there's a YouTube video that you can watch how to build this stuff. The problem with TATP is it's extremely volatile. So the fact that they were able to create 5 or 6 of these vests, not blow themselves up in the process, and each vest worked as designed, that signifies that there's some real expertise that's at play here. So whether, you know, that was imported from somebody in Syria and Iraq, whether that was somebody that was already in France, but these are some of the things I guarantee right now that the French police are thinking about, certainly the counter-terror team, is, you know, that they've cornered these guys or one of these guys in an apartment complex. You know, they have to be thinking, what else do these guys have, right? We know they have small arms.
And you want to be sure that the apartment is not rigged with any kind of explosives, which could clearly be a case in this particular situation, which could, you know, actually demolish an entire neighborhood depending on how much they have there. A very good point, Benjamin Collins, former Green Beret, and thank you for your service, by the way. And looking forward, after this situation, this police intervention that's going on, after it ends, what happens then? What's the next step? Even if you take these guys out, ISIS still remains a threat to so many countries at this point.
It does, and so, you know, I think this goes to, you know, what we lack, and of course everybody's saying this administration and I think, you know, very much the alliance has lacked a overall strategic plan, because certainly as you say, look, we can beat these guys maybe here in pockets. We can't be everywhere all the time, and I think if certainly this wasn't directed by kind of, you know, ISIS headquarters, you know, you have to think that under pressure, these guys need to raise money because their oil revenues are down. They're losing soldiers from desertion. They are under pressure, so they're going to look to make a name for themselves, right? It's something I've been watching every day. You know, if you look on Twitter and you see what's trending, ISIS hasn't left that little box of what's trending for the last 5 days. You know, that's a win for ISIS. So these things drum up kind of the propaganda. It plays to their message. But I have to think, you know, that they if you remember when they went into Iraq, they raided the banks. They took, you know, close to $1 billion worth of gold assets. They had the gray money coming in from the oil coming in from the gray market. it doesn't take a whole lot of money to make a whole lot of damage. And I think if they've been smart about this, they're moving pockets of money, they're moving groups of expertise. The trouble here, Kelly, and I think what really makes me nervous is that kind of that attitude of, look, you can defeat the army, but you have to defeat the idea. And
yes.
I think it's that idea, right, that has been so prevalent.
And that's why I've been asking a question about it, because of the idea, the ideology that they have, and passing it on to so many of our young people, and then turning those young people into terrorist wannabes, and some of them actually carrying it out, as we've seen what happened here in Paris on Friday. A lot of the attackers were all young. But I want to do something real quickly. We're getting some more confirmation from another source, this one coming from the AP, that they are saying that what we're seeing here on video right now is a manhunt for the terrorist mastermind, the mastermind of these attacks that took place in Paris, which would be Abdelhamid Abaoud. And we're waiting to get more independent confirmation. We have Steve Harrigan on the ground there, and once we get that information from Steve Harrigan, we will independently confirm that of our own. But again, these are unconfirmed reports because Fox News is not reporting it, but we're getting it from two different sources now, that he is likely to be one of the people in this situation. And if that is the case, we can anticipate that there will be a fight. As I mentioned earlier today, earlier as we started reporting, Ben, as well as Waleed, who I think is still with us, they are also looking for Salah Abdel Salam, whom French police accidentally permitted to cross into Belgium on Saturday. One of his brothers blew himself up in Paris. Meanwhile, as we've been talking tonight, both France and Russia are unleashing a new wave of airstrikes against ISIS targets in Syria, in the Raqqa stronghold that they have. So that intensified involvement coming from Russia, basically because Vladimir Putin is, the president of Russia, is very upset with the fact that it's been proven now that the Russian passenger plane that crashed over the Sinai Peninsula as it left Sharm el-Sheikh was made, that was done by a homemade bomb, which has all the hallmarks and earmarks of something sinister coming from ISIS, which took responsibility for that Metrojet going down. So, Benjamin, you talked about it. Waleed has talked about it. So let's talk about it again. The idea, and that's what makes both of you nervous. The idea itself has to be destroyed. It has to be shown as being an ugly, menacing ideology from the pit of hell. And so how do you do that? How do you do that beyond military intervention, beyond police intervention?
And that's the billion-dollar question, right? I mean, I think we've struggled with that. I think in recent years, and certainly Afghanistan and Iraq as well. Insofar as, I think we focus a lot on the military aspect, but this is a civil military solution that has to be designed. Unfortunately, I think we tend to make decisions based on data, right? And I think we live in a society where we're proud of our freedom of speech and the ability to get information processed. Unfortunately, in that region of the world, that doesn't exist, right? So we might shake our heads, right, when we see some of these guys interviewed saying that the U.S. is it's our imperialistic ambitions to take over, the oil fields, and et cetera, et cetera. The thing is, that's you can't fix that, right? I mean, that's not a 12-month solution. So to me, two things have to happen, or three things. One, the military. We've been avoiding this discussion. We've been avoiding, and President Obama has said we can't give it credibility. But if you look at the Oxford, dictionary definition of a state, right? It's an enclosed territory, a self-system of governance, laws, currency. Look, we might not want to admit it, but the Islamic State has, in effect, created a state. They occupy a territory that's the size of Maryland. So, and there is an army, right? It ranges from, do they have 20,000? Do they have 50,000? But there is going to have to be a military solution that is going to have to kill the enemy. And I hate to say it, but look, air power is not enough. right? We can bomb these guys to smithereens, but until there is an actual boot on the ground that takes that territory and holds that territory. So we have to, in my mind, if I was driving this military train, you've got to separate Mosul and Raqqa. So you've got to interdict the lines between Iraq and Syria. You have to stop them from moving men, material, equipment, and all the rest. You have to have a solution for Assad, right? Because that's the reason to be for a lot of these guys.
Right.
You know, you look at Syria, Kelly, and you know they were producing something like 4 million barrels of oil. They're down to 10,000. I mean, it's nothing. Their economy is in the tank. Their GDP is down 60%. You know, this is in 5 years that civil war has destroyed an economy and destroyed a country that's going to take decades to fix. So we have to have a civil solution for that on top of a military solution. Now, sorry, Kelly.
No, that's fine. No, I actually appreciate your breadth and of your understanding of the problem, because you've underscored it very well, and I think Waleed Perez, our terrorism expert as well, would have to agree with you. I just want to bring people up to date. For those of you who are just tuning in or may have been watching us, I just want to remind you right now that what we're seeing, our French police, as well as other security teams operating a police intervention, as the deputy mayor of the Saint-Denis neighborhood of Paris, France, has indicated. He's told people to stay indoors. Police have told people to stay indoors. There will be no school. They are conducting a police intervention in search of suspects that we understand are terrorist suspects related to the attacks that took place on Paris, France on Friday, killing 129 people. In addition to killing 129 people, 352 were injured. Of those 352 people injured, 99 of them were critically injured, and our prayers are continue to pour out. We're seeing truck movement right now as they're moving more people in. We also have been getting reports that the reason why we're seeing so much of this is because they are in search of the mastermind of these Paris shootings, and we are told, according to 3 sources now, although we cannot independently confirm this, Fox News has no independent confirmation of this, but they believe that Abdel Hamid Aboud, the alleged mastermind of the Paris shootings, is one of the targets of this Saint-Denis raid that we've been looking at. When we started this off about a couple of hours ago, we heard loud gunfire through a Twitter video. That loud gunfire could be heard. Let's see if we can pull that up again so that those of you who may have just joined us, let's listen in to this loud gunfire that unfolded. So you can hear that, a heavy exchange of gunfire. One explosion was heard, machine gun fire. This is a very serious deal. This is what they encountered, police encountered, when they went into this neighborhood in search of the suspects that they were looking for. And at that time, we didn't know all of the facts, but we had a suspicion because of the fact that police and the security teams and other intelligence services throughout Paris, France, have been trying to find those responsible for the attacks on Friday. All evening long, we've been talking about this. We've talked to Waleed Perez, and also on the phone with us is Benjamin Collins, a former Green Beret. Thank you again for your service. And Waleed, if you're still with us, so here we are, again, Ben agreeing with you and Tom Rogan, as well as Steve Harrigan, about the other aspects of this war on terror, and that is the ideological war. I know we've talked about it, we've harped on it, but it's really important that our viewers get this, because they too have to be aware of this ideological difference, and that's what's causing so many young people to go into this kind of romanticism with terrorism, thinking that they're doing something in the name of jihad, and actually bringing destruction on themselves and on innocent people.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the public, that's how I engage with my own students, on campus when we talk about these issues. Public needs to understand that the ideology is like the factory of weapons in World War II. If you don't dismantle the factory, you're going to always have new weapons. And in this case, the weapons are human. if you don't push back against the ideology, you can kill bin Laden, you can kill al-Awlaki in Yemen and eliminate leaders of ISIS. Yes, these are tactical victories, but you're going to see that there is another generation. I mean, look at the age group of those now engaged in fighting in Syria, Iraq, or in the suburbs of Paris, or the cases that we had here. They are all somewhere between 19 and 25 years old. They were 9-year-old or 10-year-old or 12-year-old on 9/11. So what did really change? Well, the indoctrination. So I cannot emphasize enough how important is the war of ideas. Now, if I can make a comment about the ongoing operation, what I'm getting from France 24 is that they have determined, the French authorities, according to France 24, have determined that Abdul Hamid Abu Oud is inside that apartment. I mean, it will have to be reconfirmed by French authorities officially, but that's what French media is mentioning. And they consider him as the actual mastermind of the Paris massacre, the Paris operation, as was the case in the past with 9/11 operation here. It had one mastermind who was apprehended later, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. So it looks like Abdul Hamid Abu Oud is the guy inside. They are not talking much about how many people are with him, but that looks like it's the objective.
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was going to say, and if he's more familiar with Paris than I am, perhaps he could comment on it. But you know, if it's the same suburb as I think it is in the northeast, Saint-Denis, if that is correct, you know. This is something that we've got to go back a couple months ago. If you remember the brouhaha, and even people at Fox got you know, taken into account when the term no-go zone was used, right?
Right.
Well, you know, Saint-Denis is one of those, and they call them sensitive urban zones. It's got one of the highest concentration of Muslims in France. So this is one of those apartments, those towns that people have talked about that you know. So to me, I think for the police, you got to wonder who else is in that building, but you also have to worry about just kind of that. I think they're going in there with a little bit of understanding that, you know, look, this could go from a single apartment fight to, you know, a second or a third or fourth. I mean, you know, Charlie always has a say, certainly in combat, and this thing could devolve into something that's much greater than what we're looking at. I certainly hope it does not. But you know, I know that they're sensitive to that district.
And that would be the case because this district in 2005, as Waleed pointed out, and our own Steve Harrigan, who's again on the ground getting more information, and we await his report when he is available to bring us more details from Saint-Denis. In 2005, they had a terrible situation, burning cars and rioting in the streets. And back then, I recall reporting, and many of us reported here, right here on Fox News Channel, this was a difficult time, and we had all wondered why. In fact, our terrorism experts, I think, Waleed, you were one of them, we had wondered why and how the French authorities could allow this type of thinking to fester to the point that it would just have an outgrowth of violence, as we saw in 2005. And now, years later, we're 10 years later, we're seeing that it was something very sinister and now erupted into the deaths of 129 people and 352 people injured and on Friday at all these soft target places. And we know that ISIS has always wanted to hit soft targets to strike fear at the heart of people who live here in the West.
Certainly, and if you look, and I think Waleed hit the nail on the head in terms of youth, right? So I mean, the unemployment rate, certainly in Saint-Denis or in these districts, is astronomical when you start looking at ages 25 and below. I mean, it's upwards of 40-45%. So you're talking about 40 to 45% of 25 and below year olds are jobless, right? So that creates kind of this, you know, this environment where you've got these young kids that don't really have much to do. They're struggling to find something. They're struggling for that identity, and I think they're probably sucked into this concept of you can be greater than who you are. And I think Waleed hit the nail on the head. When you look at these guys, you know, these are kids born after 9/11.
Yeah.
So that is something that you know we really have to come up with a solution from, as a civil society, and how we combat that.
I want to come back to that point, gentlemen, but right now we have Steve Harrigan, our senior correspondent, who's on the scene there in Paris, France. And Steve, what updates can you bring us right now?
Kelly, it seems as if a siege operation is underway right now. Most of the images we are seeing of the police are fairly static. They have several roads blocked off. More and more highways to that area just north of Paris are being blocked. Public transportation has been blocked. There are at least one and perhaps several people holed up inside an apartment building in the suburb of Saint-Denis, just north of Paris. About 3 hours ago, there were loud, violent, and lengthy gun battles between police and others inside this suburb. Now it's a siege operation with those holed up inside. There is widespread speculation about who exactly is inside. Is it one of the two suspects still at loose for the killings, the mass killings on Friday? Or is it the planner, the so-called mastermind behind these killings? We've heard from the mayor, who says there is a close link. We've heard from unnamed police sources who say there is a close link. But we really don't have the facts on who is in that room. What we have seen over the past really 48 hours are massive police raids. More than 100,000 police across the nation have been mobilized along with the military. Now, under this state of emergency, they don't need to have any permission to carry out raids. They don't need a warrant. They can place people under house arrest. So they really have been going at it all over the country, looking for people of interest. Now, based on the elite police units who are at the scene, based on the gunfire, this is certainly something big, but we're going to have to hold off a bit until we know who exactly is inside that department, despite widespread speculation that it could be some of the suspects in the mass killing, Kelly.
Steve, thank you for that. That certainly gives us a measured understanding of what possibly they're looking for, the men they're looking for. There was no independent confirmation from you, and that's why it's basically stating these are according to other reports, but unconfirmed. Until we hear it from you, and you won't report it until you hear it from authorities there on the ground, but we appreciate that. You're reporting right on point as always. I want to ask you, Steve, about the mood of that area. I know the people are being kept inside, but how can you describe the mood of the people there, knowing that this is unfolding, that they're still dealing with a menace to their society?
I think there's a real sense of being on edge here. When you hear a firecracker, when you see a car accident, when you hear a loud noise, even tires screeching, it really sets people on edge. People were attacked, civilians at leisure on Friday night, and I think it's really scared certainly the city and the nation as well. So there's a great deal of tension, and I think that's augmented by the fact that not all the killers have been caught or killed, that there's at least two of those killers still out there, either here in France, perhaps holed up in that apartment, perhaps in Belgium, perhaps back in Syria. So a lot of speculation and a lot of fear that this is certainly not a closed case yet, but certainly the gunfire and the gun battles which people are waking up to around France today only increases that sense of anxiety, Kelly.
Yeah, and we also have reports that the schools will be closed today. Is that correct?
We've seen a lot of public institutions closed, even the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower. Real sense, especially immediately after the attacks, of people being told to stay home. We saw more businesses, more traffic open in the past 24 hours, but this gun battle could be another step back. Another round of closings is quite likely, Kelly.
You know, Steve, Paris is one of the greatest destinations anyone could go to. It's a very romantic city. It will take days, months, perhaps years to rebound from this.
And I think for the people who were close to it, the people who lived through it, saw it, and heard it, you wonder if they're ever going to get over it. When you talk to people nearby the shootings, their eyes get wide when they retell it. There's a real sense of shock for the people. And also, in these neighborhoods, there's a real connection. Everybody seems to know somebody who was hurt in this tragedy. So it really has a ripple effect throughout the city, Kelly.
A lot of healing still needs to be done, and the first thing in terms of getting towards that healing is to reconcile the damage that's been done, and that means going after those in retaliation and getting them and bringing them to justice. That will certainly help the people of Paris to get back on some firm footing. Steve, bring us more updates as you can. I know you're busy getting some reports for us. As soon as you possibly can, get back with us. We're standing by, waiting for your updates. They're crucial to understanding what's happening. Take care, my friend.
Thank you.
Steve Harrigan reporting, and Steve always doing a great job. And I want to get back to Waleed. I think we still have Benjamin on the phone too. Waleed, we heard from what Steve was reporting, and I wanted to go to the heart of the matter, and that is the fact that, as Steve has reported, they are after the terrorists to not only bring them to justice, but also to try to bring healing to their nation. And that is what has to take place for them, just as it had to be done for those of us who went through 9/11 here in the United States.
Absolutely. I mean, as we monitor the political, public, popular, social reactions in France, it's only the beginning. I mean, the wound, is too early. So the French government knows very well that now they have the support to do things governments before were not able to do, which is to actually go after and dismantle the much wider jihadist network. We haven't seen in the past, obviously, deployments like the one we see now on our screens in anywhere in Paris, or let alone in these very, let's put them under brackets, sensitive areas, sensitive neighborhoods. So François Hollande knows very well that he will have to do something before a political crisis will explode with the opposition. He has a united parliament, he has a united cabinet. So this translates into tough action as we see right now. I am wondering, and it's ironic, that if indeed it's Abdelhamid Abu-Oud, the suspect of being the mastermind of the operation, is hiding here. I mean, he's hiding just few hundred meters, let's say a kilometer, from the first location of the attack. This is very interesting. If the mastermind did not leave, so what did he say? Did he have a follow-up, or did he calculate that he has no chance to leave Paris? He will stay in. How did they know? Some French media are talking about the famous cell phone they found in the vicinity of the Stade de France, where there was some information that led to the fact for the police to know that he was still in the city. And it seems in the last few hours they realized where he was and launched this operation to apprehend him or eliminate him.
Ben, let me bring you in on this, because as you know, there's a nexus of terror, and sometimes the nexus of terror it operates like a gang, wherein you have a core group supporting that gang. They carry out an attack or carry out something vicious and heinous, and they go right back to where their hiding place had always been, because they have no other form of escape. We still don't know who the police are after, but we do know that in this neighborhood there have been sympathizers, as I've stated before, to those from ISIS. We do know that many of the young people have visited Syria, received their training from ISIS, only to bring it back and inflict more harm on people living in their own places of domicile. So how would a special operations like the Green Beret conduct a counterinsurgency in this situation?
Well, so it's interesting when what we realized is very quickly that the way that these organizations structure and operate is very much the way that Green Berets are trained in terms of, so that the traditional, by doctrine, Special Forces soldiers are warrior teachers, right? So we build those armies of indigenous populations, and the way that is done, especially when we learned how to plan and execute uninsurgency, and that is to everything from the military training to train the trainers, right? You train 5 of the best on how to do something, and then they go and train their people on how to do something, right? So you're a force multiplier in that aspect. So from the pointy end of the spear all the way back to the logistics, right? So creating an underground underground is the support mechanism. Those are the people that hide, the fighters. They're the people that get them food, that move material, that aren't on a watch list, that don't have a criminal history. These are networked and they're cellular, right? So if we clamp down on one, that it should be compartmentalized so it doesn't tip off the nature or the makeup of another cell. Again, I don't want to generalize about this region because I think that's dangerous to do.
I do want you to hold your thought and remind me to get back with you about this, but we have a Sky News reporter on the phone right now who's also reporting from that area. Let's listen in now.
Any kind of positive exit for the individuals inside, whether they take a decision to end things themselves or whether it comes from the outside. I just cannot imagine a situation where this is going to be anything other than a negative for those inside the vehicle, those inside the building.
Yeah, and we're just looking at the strength of that army cordon there, Michelle. That is not even taken into account. I mean, I presume their role is secondary here. It's the SWAT team that have the momentum with them and that are in control of the operation with the army in a backup role?
Yeah, I would suggest that. I think the army are here really in a sort of protective capacity. They look like they're creating a cordon around the area, and the SWAT teams are inside around the apartment, engaged in that activity that started from about 4:30, 5 o'clock this morning. But the soldiers, as I'm seeing now, they're simply lining up around the area, creating a cordon, creating a protective shield. I would imagine as much to prevent anybody getting out as anybody getting in, because it is particularly dangerous. And we have to remember that the police and the security forces over the last few days have been searching intensively. The Interior Ministry said that 115,000 security personnel had been deployed in the aftermath of the attacks, because they're not just looking for the attackers.
Okay, so you're listening to our sister network, Sky News, which is based in the UK, and they're reporting from the location near our own Steve Harrigan with a phoner. We heard from Steve earlier, and she's describing what we've been describing all night long, how the police have cordoned off the area, trying to find... we're hoping to get some more information from her. She's basically reporting the same things that we have, but nevertheless, you can see how this is capturing the world's attention because of what's happened in Paris, France, as of last Friday, when terrorists, ISIS terrorists, went in and attacked soft targets at the football stadium, as well as the Bataclan, where a concert was going on, as well as cafes, where we lost an American who was a first-generation lady here going to college. She was there on a visit abroad to study design. She was a bright student. Talking about Noemi Gonzalez, daughter of a single-parent mother who obviously is grief-stricken because of the huge personality that she had. Just a true lover of life, and had so many things to give. 23 years old, sitting down to eat at a cafe, struck by one of these bullets from one of these terrible terrorists, and her life is no longer. And so it's pain like that that the people of Paris, France, as well as here at home, are experiencing as a result of this. But it's also the resolve of police and the security forces in Paris, France, in fact, throughout the entire country, to go after these terrorists wherever they might be hiding, get them and take them to justice, either bring them to justice or to kill them if they should resist. And we do know that the police, as well as the security forces, have been looking for the mastermind, Abdel Hamid Abaoud, as well as Salah Abdel Salam, whom French police accidentally permitted to cross into Belgium on Saturday. Abaoud, by the way, many people had assumed or reported that he had gone back to Syria, where he had been working with ISIS before. It's believed that this man that we're now looking at his picture also had something to do with trying to attack a train in France, as well as a church there. But he he could be among the people that they're looking for. We don't have any independent confirmation of that, although various people are reporting it, as well as where is Salah Abdel Salam? They're still looking for him as well, and one other person who gave the police some unsettling news because he had slipped from their fingers as well. But again, when you have things like this, Benjamin, as well as Waleed, things are very fluid. It's hard to capture all these guys because you're trying to get all the information. And we talked about the importance of sharing intelligence. And we also talked about here in America why our police have told the American people to always say, if you see something, say something. And perhaps this is what's unfolding now here in the neighborhood of Saint-Denis, where people are now saying, we saw something and we're saying something. And perhaps those leads have led to this operation here now. And that is the kind of thing that will ultimately defeat ISIS, that and the ideology that we, as Tom Rogan said earlier today, we have better values and we have to adhere to those values and stand strong on those values. Gentlemen?
So, look, Kelly, I think you're absolutely correct. I mean, this is a when you are fighting a cellular and you're fighting a terrorist network, okay, you have these cells that are operating in Europe, and you've got a structure that's occurring overseas. So the special operations, like the raid that we saw recently where we lost an American hero that the Joint Special Operations Command did, think about, some of the things that perhaps they find on target, right, have to connect to something that the beat cop in Paris that filed a report 2 days ago because a citizen just saw something, those things have to be connected. So, in a hierarchical organization, right, you can generally cut the head off and the rest will die. But the way that terror cells operate, they operate as kind of these separate nodes. And the way that these nodes have to operate, and we talked about kind of the support cell and operational commanders, there has to be communication. So whether it's email, they're using, these guys are really good. I mean, they use encrypted chat rooms embedded in video games, right, that you can play, these online video games. They get together in the chat rooms, and that's how they pass messaging. It's very hard. But I think, the last thing I'll say is I was just in New York, Kelly, last week, and I walked out of the studio when the first thing broke on Paris. And standing on the street corner and then into the subway, guess what everybody was doing? And I looked around the subway car, and 9 out of 10 people in that subway car had their exactly. They had their heads embedded in their phones, and it could be that I spent 9 years of my life, in a combat footing, but maybe I'm overly paranoid. But I'm constantly trying to be aware of my surroundings and understand what looks normal, what doesn't, and I don't want to. I'm not advocating that we need to be a paranoid society, but at the very least, we need to be an aware society and understand that vigilance will pay off. Just get your head out of the phone. Look around.
The bottom line is knowledge is power, right? That's it just comes back to that. Knowledge is power. But I want to bring an update real quickly. We're getting this from the AP. AP reporting at least 7 explosions have been heard at the scene of the police standoff with suspects in last week's deadly Paris attacks. That's what AP is reporting. Those reporters at the scene could hear what sounded like a grenade blast. We heard some of that video earlier from our Twitter feed that we received. So we will continue to hang in there, and you're listening to that now, as a matter of fact. We know that these suspects are holed up in an apartment, and several police have been injured in an operation. At least we know that, at least according to Steve Harrigan's reporting, at least one police officer was shot and wounded. There could have been a couple of more. We don't know how many suspects are in this apartment, though.
And we don't. And so the explosions, we talked about perhaps what they have inside, maybe suicide vests, but, look, they also could be the police breaching. So, one of the things that the police are going to, have done is I'm sure they've probably moved out the people in the apartments to the left and the right. Maybe there's one entryway, maybe there's 2 entryways, maybe there's a window. So they have to assess which is the best way to get the fastest entry into this room. And so maybe they're going to do a dynamic breaching, which is I'm going to blow a front entrance and a back entrance and maybe a window at the same time. So it'll distract them. Perhaps they'll use things like flashbangs, which are, very bright white light and a huge bang. It disorients the terrorists inside. That's when the police can move in. Generally, they train under those conditions, so they don't lose their own way. They can go in and find the target and prosecute it. And so if that's the reporting that we're hearing, multiple explosions, one after the other, maybe I'm trying to be optimistic about this, but it could perhaps signify that the police just initiated their assault and breach.
Well, we're going to continue to follow that, and while we're on, Waleed, again, we're seeing that when terrorists strike, they can inflict a lot of pain, a lot of fear, a lot of casualties. But we're also seeing now that there's a quick response going on right now in France. And I go back to what French President Francois Hollande said. This is an attack on us. This is an act of war, and that they would retaliate. And certainly we saw the airstrikes taking place on Raqqa. And we also saw their intelligence apparatus get into place where they started sharing information. And here we are now, looking at this situation. We've been on air for since a little bit after 10 o'clock, actually. We started talking about 2 Air France planes, which had been diverted here in the United States because of receiving anonymous bomb threats. I spoke to one passenger from that plane, Keith Rousseau, 26 years old. He was on his way to Paris, France, with his fiancée to actually celebrate the greatness of that city, and to let the people know of that city just how much he as an American cares for them. And I asked him, are you afraid to get on board that plane or any plane to go to Paris, France now? And he categorically said, no, I'm not afraid. I will not let a terrorist take away my love for life and my love for freedom. Very, very bold statement from a 26-year-old who had not served in the military but is just a proud American and letting the world know it. So here we are now, and we're seeing at the same time that was going on, we started getting reports thinking, was it just a gunfight between some criminals and police? And then it turned into this. And now here we are, reporting on a situation we're in, at least 2 or 3 suspects, as we are hearing. We will wait for confirmation from the French police, the French authorities. But certainly something is going on, something big, and it has a lot to do with the act of terror that took place on Friday, and this is retaliation of that, where the police are trying to get to them. And as I've stated all night long, they will either wait them out or take them out.
Absolutely. I mean, the scenery that we see right now in front of our eyes is nothing but the Battle of Paris by the terrorists last Friday, by the government now. Analysts in France and Paris that I have been in touch with when you were doing the comments are saying that we may see more police operations going in some of these areas. This is the first one. It all depends on how it's going to end. We know how it's going to end, but what will be the price for that? Abdelhamid Aboud, who is believed to be inside that apartment with we don't know how many persons, came only yesterday, according to the French analysts. Now, there's a debate in Paris. Was he the mastermind, or was he the operational commander? And there's a big difference. Mastermind would be the one who actually gives the ultimate order on behalf of ISIS. And the operational commander would be the one who has been tasked in Paris to execute these operations. So now we have different versions coming as we are observing the outcome of this actual operation on the ground. One of these versions, which of course would have to be confirmed, like everything else, by authorities, is that the real mastermind is not on French soil, that he is based in Raqqa. He's in charge of external operations of ISIS. He's a convert. His code name is Fabian, or maybe another name, that he has given those instructions. And that Abu Oud, who is now supposedly being encircled and delivering a battle, is the one who was the operational commander. But beyond that, what we see right now are 2 determinations. One by the jihadists and the terrorists to go forward. They are issuing videos. They are stretching this operation. In my view, I've observed this for many years, to give enough material to the next cell. Look what we have been able to do. I can imagine and project, days from now, there'll be videos, there'll be audios saying, we have been able to confront French police and French army for, I don't know, hours, a day, day and a half, very similar to what has happened in Boston, or comparable to what has happened in Boston. Remember, the city was shut down. when the two brothers were pursued by a huge force. So we are seeing that version. We are seeing the version of Boston in Paris with probably a much larger size of police and army deployment. So what we are observing now is the genesis of what may come still ahead of us, both the determination of the jihadists and the determination of the French president, the government, and their army.
And gentlemen, as we talked about earlier with Steve Harrigan, who was describing the mood of the people in Paris, France, he was talking about how many are look, this is still fresh on their hearts, their minds, and it will take years, if ever, to overcome this. Many will look back on this day and they will treat it like it just happened again and again. They'll live it over and over again, thinking, what could I have done to prevent this? So there's that mindset that goes on with the people where they almost go through a depression and a post-traumatic stress disorder. How, you know, the Green Beret, let me go back to you, Benjamin, because the Green Beret, when they go into situations like this, a lot of times people think they're just going in to kill and destroy enemy, but they also try to go in and build up those areas where so many people have been exposed to tyranny and violence from a vicious enemy. So how do you, what do you think has to take place? And we're already seeing it take place, but how do you rebuild from the terror that they've been experiencing?
Wow. I mean, that's a big question. I mean, yes, you know, Green Beret, I mean, our motto is the oppresso libera, to free the oppressed. You know, that we enter that with a lot of passion to you know, I mean, I'm going to sound a little cheesy, and maybe, you know, cheesy works when you're 21 and you can handle that, but you know, you're willing to risk your life to bring kind of the American kind of concept of freedom and values. You know, I think that as far as Paris itself is concerned and how they rebuild, I mean, you know, if you know, remember what it felt like September 12th, 2001, right? It was this concept, it was this like disbelief that this could actually happen here. It could happen to me, right? It could happen to somebody I know. I think we've had this kind of Western incorrect bias where you know, this war and chaos happens somewhere else, right? It happens in the Middle East. It happens over there. It doesn't happen here, right? We fight the wars there. It certainly got to a place, I think, where all of us that served in combat, you know, I was willing to go and do that, and I was willing to sacrifice if need be in order to make sure that this does not happen in my home. And Benjamin,
I want you to hold your thought there. We're getting some more details right now. One is that our sister network Sky News is now reporting that a woman wearing a suicide belt has been killed. And I want to dip into Sky News right now to hear more of that report.
Or two of the people inside that building were the mastermind, or the alleged mastermind, of the attacks on Friday, and also the chief suspect. Then the police knew that they had to move in, and it took a great deal of manpower, and I think there'll be some time before, even though it might be over, it's going to be a significant amount of time before the operation in there is actually fully completed.
Michelle, let me bring you up to date now with what we're hearing and just correct this. The female suicide bomber did detonate her belt. We hear she is dead. We hear one of the suspected terrorists shot dead by a police sniper, and the initial casualty was a passerby in the street. So that, Michelle, means there are now 3 fatalities now confirmed, 2 of them from the terrorist side.
Yeah, and obviously we don't have any information about who the people who have been killed are. I mean, you say 2 terrorists, but we don't know the individuals. The reports this morning were that these 2 significant individuals were in there, the alleged mastermind and the chief suspect that the police have been looking for since Friday, but clearly no confirmation yet as to the identities of those that have been killed, apart from, as you say, that 3 people have been killed, and very sadly a passerby. That was always the incredibly difficult balance for the police, launching an operation in this sort of area, a busy area in terms of people living here, businesses here, and the police were working desperately all morning, trying to tell people to stay in their homes, to keep their windows closed, not take any risk, because it was such a dangerous situation.
These are live pictures you're waking up to this morning on Sky News Sunrise. This is the Parisian suburb, North Paris, of Saint-Denis, just over a mile away from the Stade de France, where those suicide bombs took place on Friday evening, as that French-Germany game was taking place. A police operation, a raid on an apartment which contained 4 suspected people connected to those Parisian attacks on Friday, got underway 4:30 a.m. this morning. There you see the location between where these raids have taken place this morning and the National French Stadium. We can confirm today 3 casualties, 3 fatalities in this operation. The first one, a passerby. The second one of the suspected terrorists inside this apartment. We believe there were 4 of them inside there, taken out by a police sniper. And the third, a female wearing a suicide vest. So this operation was launched to catch the alleged mastermind behind the attacks which took the lives of 129 people. So we're talking about suspected attackers, potential accomplices, holed up in this apartment, and it was a big shootout. When the end probably came, this is what it sounded like. I mean, there were a series of very large explosions involved in this, and this happened just about half an hour ago. Michelle Clifford is on the ground there from... No, Michelle Clifford's not on the ground there from us, but what you're looking, these pictures with the camera cordons, Michelle's obviously trying to get closer to the action and find out more about what is actually going on. But we're looking here, this is probably around 2 blocks back from the apartment which was under siege. Gillian.
Well, we believe, and police take it on good authority and intelligence, that Abdelhamid Aboud is holed up inside that apartment. He's the reason for this raid this morning. This is the primary suspect that police have been targeting. Officials saying that he's definitely holed up in the apartment in Saint-Denis, along with up to 5 other, potentially 5 other heavily armed people, as reported by the press association, the Associated Press. Officials say that he has been holed up with those 5 other people, potentially one of those other suspects, Salah Abdeslam, who's also another highly wanted individual in connection with Abdelhamid Aboud. We know that Abdelhamid Aboud is the suspected ringleader, described as the mastermind behind the attacks on Friday, those targeted attacks involving devices, explosive devices, and people being fired upon by gunmen, and suicide attacks there also involved. He's around 27, reportedly 27, 28, and he is believed to be close to ISIS leader.
All right, so right now we are listening to our Sky News, which is our sister network, which operates out of the UK, and they are on their programming with their show Sunrise, which is their morning program, like our Fox and Friends. And obviously, when we continue with our programming here, you'll be hearing from Fox and Friends first, as well as Fox and Friends talking about this issue. This is going to be quite a story that we will continue to follow. This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Kelly Wright in New York, and we're continuing to follow the developments that have been unfolding all evening long, keeping you up to date on the situation. We have Steve Harrigan, who's there in Paris, France, and we'll continue to follow details with him. This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Kelly Wright in New York. Word coming in from France at this hour of a massive police raid in the northern Parisian suburb of Saint-Denis. Details are no longer sketchy. We have them all ironed out now in terms of some of the reports that we're now receiving from our sister network, Sky News, which is they are confirming that 3 casualties took place in this operation. You're looking at police right now in that neighborhood. It's a pedestrian neighborhood, the Saint-Denis neighborhood. It's near the stadium where the football match was going on. That's soccer, for those of us who understand that in the United States. And that's where the attack started on Friday in that stadium, which is not far away from this neighborhood that we're looking at now. And, of course, the attacks went on to the Bataclan, as well as just normal cafes where people were out dining and having a good time with their friends and even family members. Steve Harrigan is on the scene there. And, Steve, we're getting reports now from our sister network, Sky News, that a female was wearing a suicide belt. She was killed along with 2 other people. One was an innocent passerby, and another one was taken out by a police sniper sharpshooter who took out another guy that they were looking for, and that it's believed that 3 or 4, maybe as many as 5, are holed up in an apartment there.
Kelly, there's a few things that we do know for certain, and that is about 4 hours ago, there was a major gun battle in Saint-Denis, just north of Paris. It included several loud explosions, which sounded to the people who lived there like grenades. At this point, much of that area around the apartment building, much of the attention focused on the 3rd floor in that apartment building, is still sealed off. Roads closed, public transportation closed, people evacuated, that building evacuated. By many accounts, there are still people holed up inside that apartment building. So this operation is now looks like a siege operation. There are elite police units outside the building as well as soldiers. And of course, over the past 3 days, France has mobilized more than 100,000 police as well as soldiers to try and keep French citizens safe, but also to hunt down at least 2 suspects who helped murder 129 French citizens Friday, and also for anyone involved in the plotting and planning. At this point, there is a great deal of information coming out, much of it from unnamed sources, about what has exactly transpired over the past 5 hours. But what is clear is it's a major operation. There's been gunfire. There's been grenades exploding. The area is cordoned off right now, and there are still people holed up inside an apartment building. So this is an operation which is still dangerous, volatile, and ongoing. And it's happening in a city and a country, really, that is still on edge. We saw the terrible events Friday in Paris, and now just north in a pretty rough neighborhood in the suburb north of Paris, more gunfire and grenades. People are waking up to this with a great deal of uncertainty and anxiety. Are those 2 suspects in that apartment building? Is the ringleader, the planner in that apartment building? Have they been killed? All those questions yet to be answered. We are hearing reports from unnamed police sources at this time, but really no definitive answers yet, Kelly.
But we do know that the deputy mayor has described this as a police intervention, telling people not to come outside of their houses, as well as no school, no opening of public facilities. Is that correct?
That's right, because this is really a massive operation going on. You can see just all down the street, police cars, ambulances, as well as soldiers and elite police in heavy combat gear. So certainly a frightening scene for anyone waking up and looking outside of their windows. Shutting off public transportation, shutting down schools, telling people to stay inside, and no official word yet that this operation has ended, Kelly.
You know, see, Paris, France is not seeing this kind of destruction on its city since World War II. So one can understand why this is the carnage from this terrorist attack. It has such a visceral impact upon the people emotionally, physically, spiritually. You know, we've talked about this before. It's going to take some time to overcome this, even after they get those responsible.
I think it's really hard for people still today to understand exactly what happened, to understand who they're dealing with, to understand an enemy that can shoot and murder young people while they're listening to music or while they're eating dinner. When you ask a lot of people on the street, what do you think about what happened, it's not anger or rage or a quick answer. People just shake their heads and say, you know, I really don't understand the people who did this, Kelly.
Steve Harrigan bringing us up to date with his report from Paris, France, where since about 10:30 this evening, we've been talking about the shooting that's been going on there, the explosions that unfolded there, and we continue to follow the developments there. And Steve will be getting back with us as he gets more information and gets some more confirmation of the facts of what's happening there on the ground. We appreciate Steve's effort, and is such a great reporter, doing such a great job for us this evening under some very intense circumstances, as he's been talking about with the people of Paris, France, and how they're trying to cope with this. Along with Steve has been Waleed Ferris, Fox News contributor, terrorism expert, and also we have Benjamin with us, who is a former Green Beret. You know, so here we are. We're getting more facts now. We're getting it from our sister network, Sky News. And it goes to what you were talking about, Ben, in terms of those explosions that we heard. Here's a female that we're hearing was wearing a suicide belt that has been killed, and a police sharpshooter, a sniper, taking out apparently one of the suspects. Steve, not knowing how many people are in there, we don't know how many people are in that building, but we can see from the video that this is a huge police intervention as they go after the guys, or the men and women who are responsible for this terrorist attack that took place on Friday. So at this point, if there are people still holed up in there, is this a wait and see operation to perhaps find out, to make sure that there are no booby traps in this building?
It is, and if I heard correctly, that there was already one civilian casualty.
Yes, a passerby.
So you know, if you look at the Bataclan theater, when you're dealing with a siege or a hostage situation, I think one of the most important things and one of the most important data points that you need is to understand what the motivations are of the people holding within there. And I don't think anybody doubts what the motivations of these people are. It's to kill as many people as they possibly can. And look, I think we need to stop looking as a society and kind of just table the political correctness for a second and say, look, these are people that have bought into a message, and it's a message that's been that they've been, certainly parts of it have been spreading for hundreds of years. That these people are willing to die and kill for this caliphate that they are trying to build. So we have to stop, I think, looking at this as these kind of like, wow, these people are really just out there on the wings and they believe in just something crazy, and we just have to, you mentally want to think that this is a small thing, right? This small incident, that it's a guy here and a girl there, and that's just not the case. I mean, there is a movement, they believe in this. So, for these cops and for the counter-terrorist teams that are standing out there, that one data point has been, they know that these people want to take as many of them as possible. To me, if they're waiting, it's have they cleared everybody else out in the building? What's the structure of the building? How old is the building, right? If enough of these suicide vests go, can it collapse the building? Can it go through another floor? Are there civilians down below? Those are all the questions that I'd be asking, and I'm sure that they've already kind of executed that kind of getting everybody out of there.
Yeah,
but at some point, they're just going to have to breach and kill. I mean, that's just the reality.
Well, we're hearing now from French Justice Minister that the assault operation in this neighborhood of Saint-Denis is near an ending. When we want to make sure that we follow that up to make sure it's confirmed. But it does not look like a wrap-up operation with so many vehicles and police still there at the time, at this moment. Well, we can also dip into our sister network, Sky News, which has been following the developments as well, and hear what they're talking about. Is the operation near an end? And they can bring us some more updates. And of course, we'll wait to hear from Steve Harrigan or our own Greg Palcott as the developments continue. Let's dip in right now to Sky News.
So you'd have to expect them to have some sort of plans to either escape or to go into hiding nearby. And it's obviously over the last 4 days, the police and security services have carried out a thorough investigation and now identified the premises close by and carried out the operation in the early hours this morning.
I was saying to Jeremy, if it does turn out to be Aboud inside that apartment, and the police are very much saying this operation is not over. These are live pictures that you're waking up to, and reports are varying between 2 fatalities and 3 fatalities. I think we're pretty certain that a passerby has been killed, and there seems to have been a woman inside there who's detonated a suicide vest. But what a feather it would be in the cap. I mean, how valuable would it be to take this guy alive?
I think the #1 target from this is that he's been named as the mastermind, that the planner behind all this, to actually identify him and then either capture him or deal with him properly would be an immense feather in the cap for the French police service.
What happens now? Will he want to be taken alive?
In my experience, no. You tend to find they don't want to be taken alive. They have a wealth of information and intelligence. They are, as we've seen, they are willing to take their own lives, to die in the cause. So in my experience, they would be extremely unwilling to come out and surrender. This is probably why we're seeing such a long standoff before the security services go back in to the premises.
Well, you say a long standoff. It may be a long day, Jeremy. The police now confirming that the operation is ongoing, so there is still at least one person inside that apartment.
Certainly what we're hearing at the moment, there is no sign of this outer cordon of security being cleared at all. It's pretty much a lockdown right here in the heart of the Saint-Denis suburb. We're right by the town hall, the mairie, here in the square of Victor Hugo, and there is a cordon of police and police vehicles and armed police right in front of us here. The scene of the apartment, the stakeout, the siege, literally down that side street. And from what we're seeing and hearing here, it's pretty...
Yeah, obviously there's big competition there for the communications around the whole area. Jeremy's about, just to put it in context there for you, he's about 2 blocks back, and you know the world's media has descended there. But Graham Wetton, security expert who's with me here in the studio as well, look at the scale of that operation. I mean, massive is a pretty appropriate word for this, isn't it?
Yeah, but you understand, I think we've flooded the area with police and security services and the military as well. You'll see paramedics.
All right, so we've been listening to Sky News, our sister network, and of course they're reporting on the same events that we are, and our reporters are on the ground, Steve Harrigan, getting more solid information for us. But here's what we know so far from what we're hearing from our sources at Sky News, as well as other sources coming in, and that police have descended upon this neighborhood in Saint-Denis in Paris, France, looking for suspects related to the terror attacks, and as a result of that, explosions were heard, and we want to go to those explosions now so you can hear exactly what was unfolding. We're trying to show you some of the video of the explosions as they took place and the gunfire that erupted as police descended upon this neighborhood, a police intervention to try to apprehend the 3 or 4, possibly 5 suspects related to the terror attacks on Paris, France on Friday. Among them, there are reports that they were actually looking for a man who's believed to be the mastermind or the operating commander, and that would be Abdelhamid Aboud, and then also Salah, who was actually one of the other people who tried to, who was actually in French custody and was able to flee there. They let him slip through his fingers, and they were looking for him again. That was Salah Abdel Salam, whom French police accidentally permitted to cross into Belgium on Saturday. We do know that one of his brothers blew himself up in Paris, and we also know that his family, basically, his family reported they wanted to disown him because they didn't like what he was doing. It was not what they wanted. not the kind of lifestyle that they applauded or even wanted. And many people will ask them questions as to if they knew anything, did they say anything? With us throughout the night has been Waleed Phares, Fox News correspondent, terrorism expert. And Waleed, so we're getting all this information in now. It's becoming quite apparent that the main target of the police operation was the suspected mastermind or operations chief of all of this. And Abdel Hamid Abaoud, these names, they get to you after a while, believed to have been in Syria, but now apparently in France. So it looks like he may have gone right back to the neighborhood that he hid in and lived in for so long. And if that is the case, is this kind of the pattern of what these terrorists who train in Syria and then go to these other areas, is this the pattern of what they do? They go back to where they roost?
Kelly, the information that was provided by Sky News is very important. Let me reconstruct the case now. The fact that a woman suicide bomber was killed, this means that while the operation of Friday, November the 13th was ongoing, she was not involved in that operation. So now that you see that French authorities are about or want to extract the mastermind, what was she doing with him? So this confirms some of the concerns that we had already early next week or the end of last week, that there are members of that jihadi network outside the network that executed. This is very serious. And for a woman jihadi, who is a suicide bomber, to be involved in this, it means that this is core ISIS. You don't have teenager suicide bombers involved in an operation like this one and not core ISIS. Second, Sky News mentioned that up to 4 to 5 jihadists could be involved in the resistance in that apartment. This is half of the number of those involved in last week's operation. So this leads me to project that most likely the return of Abu Laoud to this location with a woman suicide bomber, 4 to 5 jihadists, was aimed at another operation. Otherwise, he would have fled. They would have disseminated. Why would they regather in one place? Fortunately, French authorities knew about their location and went in. This confirms concerns that we have about the follow-up, the aftermath of that operation.
And it also shows, if we go back to 2005, this same neighborhood where they began to set cars on fire and they rioted in the streets. And at that time, there were many questions raised by so many people about what was going on in Paris, France. And was this allowed to fester? And did ISIS go in and seize this opportunity to inflict this kind of pain and casualty upon the freedom-loving people in the City of Light? And is it an indication that perhaps the intelligence apparatus that France has used so many times, did they drop the ball? It's a question that's going to be asked. Did they drop the ball in allowing this kind of hostility to fester within its own boundaries?
Kelly, you actually are drawing attention to a very important point. We are at the 10th anniversary of those events, 2005, precisely in November. It just happened that I was there promoting my book. And we met with advisors to Interior Minister at the time, Sarkozy, who became the president. He was considering at the time to send forces to stop what was happening. But the government decided otherwise at that time, and he warned that, with years, though these are social issues, but with years there will be infiltration. At the time, he said Al-Qaeda, because ISIS was not up and running, and then eventually other jihadist organizations. So the equation in those neighborhoods is that these are sensitive neighborhoods, but could be infiltrated and penetrated by the jihadists. So we have two types of problems. One is anti-police, anti-government, anti-everything, and controlled by thugs in some of these neighborhoods. That's one thing. But then you have ISIS moving in, providing arms and weapons and money and recruitment and drugs, and trying to seize the control of these neighborhoods. And the worst would be that, as in this operation, if it goes bad, if the French authorities do not close it, then this could fester into a much bigger problem. That's why you see this huge number of armed forces by the French government. They know exactly what they're doing. If they don't close it well, it's going to blow up much bigger.
And so, having said that, they have to close this well. They have to take this this kind of malevolent thinking and force out of their jurisdiction, out of their country. And as Steve Harrigan has talked about while reporting from there, many of the people who have witnessed this terrible tragedy that unfolded on Friday the 13th in Paris will likely never get over this. It will take them years to actually get to some firm footing. So in moving forward, what does Paris, France, as well as all of France, have to do in order to stand up and actually take a stand against this kind of terrorism? We're seeing it. We're seeing that they're launching airstrikes, but getting back to a place of resolve so that they do not go through this again. And what lessons must we learn here in the United States from what has taken place there?
For the real battle, the battle of resolve, as you call it, which is, has to be done in France by the French people and their politicians and their government. And the foremost matter is to stay united, remain united, and not let politics manipulate this. And so far, it's holding well. And that explains why the speeches by Socialist President Hollande were very strong on national security, and he got the support of the conditioned support of the opposition. It's as if there was an indirect message. You do your job. You go after those networks, first yourself, and that's why they're there tonight and this morning in Paris, then against the wider network, and third, find a solution for the instability and the problems that we have in the suburbs, and not just in Paris. We're talking Marseille, Lyon, and other cities. That's the first and most important thing. And then they would engage in a foreign policy. You see, the French, for example, over the past 24 hours, have been talking with the Russians and with the Americans on both sides and telling them, let's try to find a common denominator to go after ISIS. So the French now are fired up to find a sort of a wider alliance in the region so that there could be a real action, even considering putting maybe not large troops, but some troops on some grounds with some allies.
Benjamin, are you still with us?
Yes, sir.
You know, I want to put this out to both of you because I just received an email from a couple of people, but I want to bring in another equation here that we talked about this all night long, and I want to get back to it again because we can talk about how we're going to defeat ISIS militarily, and that is a good strategy. We do have to take the battle to them and be offensive about it. But looking beyond that, we have talked about it being an ideology, an idea. And I was at Times Square Church on Sunday morning, and we have to talk about this as well, and a pastor from a church, a block, the same block where the Bataclan is, the theater, who has used that theater before for some of his activities. And he said, he sent a letter to the pastor of Times Square Church here in New York City. And he said, I want the people of America to know that we want you to pray for us, but throughout this ordeal, we will stand strong and take a stand, whatever it might cost. I thought that was very telling because ISIS is under the impression that we will cower to fear. And here's a pastor right in the middle of all of this tragedy going on. He sees it, he hears it, he feels it, he smells it. And he says, we will take a stand, whatever the cost might be. And so when we address the ideology aspects and the fact that ISIS considers us to be weak and infidels, it is time that we take a stand in terms of our faith and in terms of that young 26-year-old passenger aboard that Air France flight that was diverted because of a bomb threat this evening, who I spoke to, and he said, I will stand and I will take a stand. I thought that was very telling that the American people, and I bring this up because, as Congressman Peter King said, we are the #1 target for ISIS. And we must look at this situation in Paris, France right now and not cower in fear or shirk our responsibility to stand up and get over our partisanship divide and stand together and help each other. Now, I know I'm waxing politically here, or not politically, but at least poetically, but the bottom line is these are things that must be said in terms of dealing with this enemy.
Look, Kelly, from my perspective, I think that you know, you know, this is just my gut what I'm watching right now. I mean, there's a function of this where you know, we almost are letting them win, right? I mean, and I think that is going to be the key here, right? And I'm probably just killing this quote, but that quote, you know, those who give up liberty for security deserve neither. You know, that's a conversation that's going to have to re-enter. I mean, if this is a hateful, very old ideology that we have been fighting. I mean, look, the first Marines, I mean, we're going back to the Barbary pirates. I mean, this is something that we have been facing for a very long time. And I think that as a society, if you want to defeat them, then let's actually celebrate, you know, our values and our freedoms and understand that. And there's going to be risk, you know, that's associated with it. What I'm afraid to see, and what I've seen, you know, I think Hollande said that they're going to issue you know, a constitutional amendments to allow them to go after these guys. I think you have to be careful and look at this as the scope of what makes our country great and what makes freedom so special. So we can't lose our minds and suddenly, because of this fear, just shut this thing out to a point where we start giving up these individual liberties, right? And I think that's going to be incumbent on the people to be vigilant, to work with a government that's actually effective. And that, I think, is going to be the key. You fight ideology with ideology. I think people will take freedom any day, but they have to understand the value of it. But look, I'm going to be honest with you. I have met this enemy face to face. You know, there is no teaching this enemy another way.
No.
I mean, we're talking about this is and I don't want to sound so inhumane, but look, just 8 hours ago in Nigeria, Boko Haram exploded, caused a terrorist attack, and they killed 32 people. You know, we're very focused on Paris, but look what just happened in Nigeria.
As well as Lebanon.
And so, I mean, this is a global threat. And we're not talking. We don't have the live reporters going on there. I mean, this is just something that I think we have to wrap our minds again. But we cannot lose ourselves. We cannot lose our soul as a country, because if we start doing that, we start giving in. And look what's happened in the last 36 hours, right? You know, soccer games shut down. I mean, people are calling in bomb threats. They're turning planes around. You know, earlier today I saw, you know, 1,000 tweets in a second about a British air flight that was turned around because a woman was trying to breach. You know, and our first thought now is, oh my goodness, it's another terrorist attack. Oh my goodness, it's another terrorist attack.
Well, look, and the main reason, let's be clear here, the main reason why that I brought this up about the ideology, and I continue to bring it up, because we should not allow ourselves to ever be afraid. And again, that young man, Keith Russo, 26 years old, he's the same age as my sons. And my sons, like him, say they're very proud to be who they are and proud to live in the country that they live in. And they look in the face of fear and say, we will take a stand, just like that pastor in that neighborhood where the Bataclan is, saying, we will take a stand, whatever the cost. So my point is, and I shouldn't be making a point, so my question is, what do we do in order to uphold our values, in order to take this fight to the enemy? And while we may not rid them of their ideology, we will rid them of being a menace to our men, women, and children and our future generations.
So you need to put a you know, that making an analogy of the finger in the dike. You got to block the hole, and the first thing you got to do is cut this cancer out of the world. So we need a strategy that comes down from, you know, the President of the United States that works hand in hand with European partners. You know, look, we have spent billions. I mean, I helped train. I mean, you're talking about Jordanians, United Arab Emirates, right? The Egyptians, Saudi Arabia. I mean, we spent billions in military aid to these countries. Where are their soldiers? Right? Why aren't they on the ground going after ISIS? It's their backyard that's on fire. You know, never mind the hundreds of thousands of refugees that are stirring up everywhere. But to me, we've got to lead. And look, the world is not set right if America is not leading, right? We call, and don't please take that as an imperialistic statement. I'm just saying that America is fantastic because we have stepped into the dark as a light in the past. If you look at it, certainly World War II, World War I, to me we have to lead, and we're going to have to step in and kill this enemy. We're going to have to kill this enemy because when we kill it there, then the police are left. You've got to allow the police to do their work. Again, we're talking about hubs and spokes. Right, so you've got the spokes and you've got the hubs of these terror networks. If you cut off the funding, you kill its leadership, right? You kill the real masterminds. In my mind, I look at somebody like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. That was a mastermind, right? That was a guy that had put together the 9/11 operation. To be honest, maybe I'm just a little overly angry right now, but this little punk that they're chasing, he's not a mastermind. To me, this is a guy that has been more lucky than good, and hopefully he's gonna achieve his life goal tonight and meet his maker. But
let me bring
Kelly,
go ahead.
I just you're talking about how do we defeat this ideology? Well, that's going to take time, but you first have to kill this cancer, and then you have to go after the cells that are outside of this cancer. And we're talking a multi-generational effort here to do this.
When you talk about this cancer, and Walid, I'll bring in on this one. The cancer has caused a lot of persecution of people throughout the world, of Christians, Yazidis, and even Muslims themselves. And the world cannot sit idly by and watch persecution unfold and not do something about it. And as Benjamin talked about, you have to go after that enemy which is causing the persecution. If you go back through World War II, there was persecution going on then, and the world had to get on board to stop that persecution dead in its tracks. And so here we are again in 2015, the 21st century, when you would have thought we would have been beyond this, and yet we have this maniacal, demonic menace trying to put the country under some sort of fear and oppression and terror, and as Benjamin said, it has to be taken care of. Otherwise, those innocent people who are already being persecuted and beheaded, and we already took care of Jihadi John, but at the same time, a day after taking care of Jihadi John, we see the Friday 13th attack. So it can't be just one person. Not onesies, twosies. It has to be an all-out aggressive campaign. As France President Hollande said, this is an act of war.
Absolutely. Kelly, I have met this threat, this ideology, last century. I was born and raised in Beirut, as you know.
Yes.
I was a lawyer and a writer. And I have been engaging with the ideologues of Salafi jihadism and Khomeini's jihadism since the late 70s, early 80s. They have a determination. We're talking about the Cold War. And during the Cold War, they were already planning on strikes against the West. Now that's something. Even after the end of the Soviet Union, they continued, they focused on the West. And then after 9/11, they mutated. I've seen it evolving for the last, 30 years now. What response should be is that from the top of the free world, that would be the office of the President of the United States, there should be a major declaration to identify the ideology. If we don't have an identification, as the 9/11 Commission asked us to do, this is a bipartisan, fully patriotic commission which debated and debated for weeks and months and came up with a 400 pages recommendations asking the American public, the Congress, and all administrations to come to identify the ideology. And based on this identification, we can mobilize the public here. We could give real goals to our national security agencies. And more importantly, at the end of the day, Kelly, we could find the right allies on the ground. I mean, we were discussing what are the Arab armies doing? Well, they're fighting in Yemen. Yeah. They're fighting in Sinai. They're fighting in Libya. They're fighting everywhere they can. And why are they not fighting in Syria and Iraq? I will share with you what is my opinion. Because we are blocking them. Washington is blocking them. We don't want them to go fight there because we have an Iranian deal which is blocking this. The Iranians, they don't want to see the Saudis or the Yemenis or the Egyptians or the Jordanians coming to Raqqa, going to Mosul. I've been making the case. 5 Arab armies, they could do it. We could be with them. The French are with us. We could coordinate with the Russians. But we don't want to offer these areas to the Iranian regime and the Syrian regime and Hezbollah. We don't want to move from one jihadism to the other. We have to be smart. So all begins from the top. Determine, identify what is the ideology, find the right allies, and not just countries. We have the minorities, as you just mentioned. We have the Kurds, the Assyrians, the Syrians, the Copts, the Berbers. We need to have a general federation of all these minorities, plus civil societies in the Muslim world.
Walid, well said, and as you know, members of Congress on both sides of the aisle have said this ISIS menace is not contained, as the president had said the day prior to the Friday 13th terrorist attack. And many are now calling on a change in strategy. But that has not taken place yet. The White House doubling down on its strategy. And many people are now saying, well, what's next if the United States will not lead? And, of course, the president was at the G20 summit in Turkey and became very defensive about what was going on. We will wait and see what the president decides to do when he returns. He will be meeting with French President Hollande this week at the White House when he comes here, if that so happens, because of the situation that we're seeing unfold in Paris, France right now. But it remains to be seen if the United States will take that lead role, as you and Benjamin have talked about, and as members of Congress have discussed, as well as generals who have said on this air, we must do more than just contain, because ISIS has not been contained. It wants global domination and will do so by any means necessary. So by any means necessary, the United States should go out and help lead these nations, as well as the nations in the Middle East and Arab nations and Muslim nations, lead the fight against this menace. Benjamin?
Yeah, look, Kelly, I agree. You mentioned Congress, which kind of teed something off in my head. I mean, look, I think it's time for Congress to get off their benches and start doing the job that we pay them to do. So if you in my mind, look, I was a guy that kind of grew up in the post 9/11, right? I mean, I joined the Army in 2000. 9/11 happened, and suddenly I was thrust into a war. So there was this kind of, almost blind naivete, I guess, in terms of the patriotic fervor. And after 9/11, we were all angry. I think that as a people, we have started to push it aside, and we have become less understanding of the cost of war and why the price of peace is valued, if that makes sense. Because look at what Congress and the administration, and certainly Congress, has not done. They have yet to find the courage to debate the authorization of use of military force, the AUMF. They are still operating off an AUMF that was passed in post 9/11 that specifically is to target Al-Qaeda, which in this case, we still have a president that is expanding the AUMF and is operating off the basic AUMF. Now, to me, Kelly, this is a moment in our history where I think Congress needs to stand up and have the courage, have the debate the AUMF, because then they're going to hear from their people, they're going to hear from their constituencies, and the American people can stand up and say, I recognize that this is an existential threat, or I do not. I support that we put in ground troops, or I do not. But the will and the voice of the American people have to be heard. And the constitutional authority for that is embedded in the representatives. And to date, they have not done it. They have kicked the can down the road as a Congress, just as this president in Turkey, for 40 minutes, like a petulant child, was defending, his policies, and has kicked this thing to the curb to essentially the next president. And I can tell you that the morale in terms of the military, in some of the national security mechanisms, it is about as low as you can find it. And that, to me, Kelly, is the most, is when we start pushing people out because we've made things so politically correct and we have made things so kind of careerist-driven in the military and in the national security mechanisms. We are losing our best people, the people that are supposed to be there to defend us. And this president is just kicking this thing down the road as if some magical thing is going to occur if we're not leading. You know, Waleed is right. You know, yes, there's the larger geopolitical concerns and constraints with the Iran deal and Russia, but at the end of the day, you know, how many constraints do you have to, you know, get over when you start seeing them massacring Christians, when they start massacring people in cages and drowning them and burning them alive and running them over with tanks? You know, this is not something that we're going to send John Kerry over with you know, a band and we're going to fix this thing. These people have to be taken at their word that they want to destroy us, and we have to destroy them. And if we have to change the face of the geopolitical map to do so, then that's what we have to do. And I know that might sound naive, but if there was ever a time that we need to actually act, this is it. I just don't think we have a president that's willing to do it, Kelly.
Well, thanks for telling us how you feel. And
I'm sorry.
It's understandable. A lot of members of the military have expressed their frustration, but I just want to remind people that we're looking at video of what's still unfolding in Saint-Denis in France, in Paris, France, to be exact. A woman wearing a suicide belt was killed along with 2 other people. One of the suspects, believed to be a suspect in the terror bombing that took place on Friday 13th in Paris, France, was shot by a police sniper. Another innocent person killed in France as a result of these suspects. A passerby was shot. We heard a lot of gunfire off of a video that we had received from Twitter. And we played a lot of that video, and you could hear the gunfire, you could hear the explosions, and we don't know what kind of weaponry there was. There are reports that Kalashnikovs had been used, and certainly the police have their own equipment and ammunition as well, and weapons. But we're listening to that again. Let's go back and relive this. And that's what you were hearing, that sound right there of an explosion taking place, and then there was subsequent gunfire as well, and everything has come to a standstill at this point as we look at the video that's coming in of today. Sky News reporting there on the scene, our own Steve Harrigan reporting. I mentioned Sky News because they're our sister network operating there in Europe, based in the UK. Everyone, the entire world is watching this unfold because of what took place on Friday the 13th, when people who were going to a soccer game at the National Stadium there in Paris, France, which is only a few blocks away from this neighborhood that we're looking at right now. And a man tried to enter in, a security officer checked him and realized it was a vest. The man backed away from it, pushed a button and detonated the suicide bomb vest that he was wearing, exploding outside of the stadium. And people actually took a sigh of relief, because you can imagine the high number of casualties that could have unfolded had he gone into that stadium where a soccer match was being played between France and Germany. So there are quite a few people packed there, including the president of France, Francois Hollande. He was rushed out of there, obviously, and then they began to understand that something was unfolding. I remember hearing about this Friday night and kept watching it. We just thought at first it was just a situation. Well, the situation turned into the City of Lights nightmare. The greatest nightmare since World War II. 129 people at the end of that night had been killed. 352 people had been wounded. 99 of those 352 injured and wounded had been in critical condition, and the hospitals were working feverishly to make sure they took care of everyone. France was put on a war footing. And the president of France coming out basically stating that this is an act of war and it's an attack on all humanity. He was supposed to go to the G20 summit. He was unable to do so in order to take care of his country. And France, subsequently to those attacks, began launching airstrikes against ISIS in Raqqa, Syria, where they are based, and began conducting those attacks. Russia also joining the fight now because of finding out that the attack on their plane, the Russian Metrojet that went down over the Sinai Peninsula on November 1st, that ISIS took credit for. Russian authorities were able to find out what UK and US investigators had determined some time ago, that it was a bomb, a homemade bomb. Vladimir Putin vowing revenge. And now here we are today, where we've seen for the past 4 to 5 hours a police intervention in the neighborhood close to where it all began on Friday the 13th. And the police intervention resulting in the death of one suspect, a female, who was wearing a suicide vest or belt, another suspect, and it's believed that 3 others are in there. Now, one of the things that that we want to report on is the fact that police believe they're after the mastermind. Excuse me if I lose my voice for a minute there. Wally, I'm going to ask you to come in for a little bit with me here and talk to me while I take a drink of water and get my voice back. And for those of you listening, it's been a long night, been talking quite a bit. But Wally, one of the masterminds of this operation was believed to have been involved in this as well, and that's Abdelhamid Abaoud. And of course, they're still looking for Salah, and have not been able to find him either. It could be that 2 of those guys are right there.
It could be. I mean, French sources now making this public that the assault initially targeted Abdelhamid Abaoud, the presumed mastermind, or let's call him also operational commander, because he could be one or the other, meaning the one who actually either executed or the one who decided. We will know that later. But possibly Salah Abdeslam and his brother could have been also inside that apartment. Now, French sources have said that the attack began, or the operation began at 4 o'clock, 4:30. And the first 2 explosions were actually by authorities, by French law enforcement, to open the gates or the doors. And the third bigger explosion was, the lady, the woman, the suicide bomber who set off her own suicide vest. That explains a little bit about the explosions. And then the firefight that which lasted about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. That's according to French sources. Now, these sources are not telling us if there is 1 or more persons inside. Sky News had mentioned that their sources told them up to 4 persons were inside that apartment. We're still not clear on the situation. There is a meeting at the Élysée, which is the presidential palace in France, between the president, the prime minister, and some of the ministers, which means that they would have to make a decision on important things, or after the operation is over, they would have to make an announcement to the French people. I still believe the fact that there was a female suicide bomber there and a number of jihadists, all of those were not involved in the Friday, November the 13th operation, that it is very possible the fact that they stayed in Paris so close, in Saint-Denis, where they thought they would be protected, where the police won't go, that was ominous enough to tell me that they may have been trying to prepare for another operation.
Wow. Yeah, that being said, it's very plausible to think that way because obviously they had a nexus of terror operating there and in their own neighborhood. And as you know, the video coming out of out of ISIS had gone on to boldly state and taking credit for what took place on Friday the 13th. In addition to that, Waleed, the video said that we will strike again, that this was just the beginning for Paris, that they would conduct more attacks, and they pointed the finger at the United States, saying, you will be attacked as well. And ISIS went on to say in that video, we are attacking Paris, France, because of the fact that they have joined the United States in attacking ISIS strongholds. And so here we are, a declaration of war, not only against Paris, France, but against the United States. And as we know, they have beheaded several Americans. That particular person was taken out, Jihadi John, a great English-speaking voice, but also a great menace to so many innocent people, and his brutality is no more.
Well, if I may, Kelly, let's go back just 2 days in time. and realized that the operation was conducted by a group of people. So logically speaking, those armed individuals who are now doing the fight with that woman should have dispersed or should have not been together. This is the law of intelligence and counterterrorism. The fact that they regathered in that location is important. Now, French authorities have been sending signals over the past couple of days, maybe 3 days, that they want to first make sure that the cell which actually conducted the operation, that cell, they knew that there were more people because probably of the cell phone information. So they want to make sure to terminate it, to finish it. As they got the information, they moved on to question. Because you asked earlier what would be next, is are there other cells? Are there other cells? And why are we asking the questions? I mean, why French experts are asking the question? Because their authorities have declared that there are hundreds of French citizens who have gone to Syria and Iraq, got that training. Many among them, they don't have the real numbers, came back to France. So now we're living an important moment, the ending of the cell on the one hand, and the question, will another one emerge, appear? And we ask the question because ISIS has issued videos, and usually when they issue video and warning, not just about France, but about Europe and the United States, it means that they may have other cells.
You know, Benjamin, what Walid is talking about is really important material and information that our FBI is concerned about, our police forces are concerned about, particularly here in New York City and other major cities like San Francisco and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, because they are seeing the information and they're concerned about the fact that they sometimes lose sight of the chatter that goes on when they go dark, bringing people in through various mechanisms or apps like WhatsApp. And they send messages out, and then before our people can read it, within 3 or 4 seconds, that message is encrypted or just goes away forever. So we have a Herculean task to try to penetrate that. And with all of our, when you think about the fact that we're the United States, the home of Apple and Google and Microsoft, and for goodness sakes, it just seems like, you know, and we can get over this this regulation or this constraint that we have about what happened with the NSA and unleash the forces of the NSA to go after this and break into that digital caliphate, because that's where some of the battle has to be enjoined.
Well, look, I think, you know, from my perspective, I think, you know, it's you know, unleashing the full powers of the NSA. I think, to be honest, Kelly, just makes me a little bit nervous. But
don't misunderstand my point. I mean, in terms of the sense where it doesn't overstep its boundaries. We've already gone through that. But the point is that they have the ability to go in there. And then we have our own Apple and Microsoft where they can go in and learn how to hack into what the digital caliphate is doing.
So you know, I think one of the consequences of the 9 years of war is that our enemy learned our tactics, techniques, and procedures, and we were very good. And the technology to track signals intelligence and electronic intelligence skyrocketed. There was this incredible curve in terms of what we were able to do before 9/11 and then soon after 9/11. We got very good at tracking these guys through metadata, where their phones were. We could target it with drones. You know, we could follow these guys in vehicles. They started realizing that every time they turned on their phone, you know, a black helicopter would land about 40 feet in front of them, and that was end of their day. So one of the consequences of the high-tech war that we were executing is they have gone low-tech. So which makes this even harder. So if you look at, you know, the way that Bin Laden was able to kind of stay off the grid, you know, they had some extremely significant rules, right? So they were using couriers. They were using humans with coded and written commands or memorized. That's very hard to track, Kelly. And we keep talking about why did they go back to this apartment. You know, remember that cellular structures and terrorist networks, you know, they when they build these undergrounds, right? I mean, you have different groups of people that they recruit. You know, you've got your hardcore believers that you're going to be your your homicide or suicide bombers and your soldiers, all the way down to the people that are kind of like, you know what, doesn't really bother me. I don't really, but fine, you can use my apartment. You can use it as a safe haven, right? I'm not going to tell the police, but you're not going to see me go out and buy something for you and me get wrapped up in this. So it runs the gamut between the two. But they use these underground nodes for logistics, right? For safe havens after an operation, to get food, to get medical care and all the rest. So there's a good chance that they went back to this apartment because perhaps that apartment was one of these situations. How you track that, it's not a function anymore of just tracking these guys' phones, and if you see some, suspicious behavior, you figure out what their phone number is, you file a warrant, you get a tap, you start listening to it. It's much harder now, and as you very correctly noted, these guys are very creative with what they're doing. They're using video games to do this stuff. They're using, if you remember, a lot of these guys were going into a shared email account, and they would write a draft email, and they would save it, and then you would go on, and then you would look in my draft inbox, and you would see what I'd written, and then you'd erase it. So we would actually never send an email.
Right.
Right, so you couldn't track those zeros and ones. So you're right. We do live in kind of the bastion of technology. Unfortunately, these guys have gone very, very low tech to operate. Now we're still kind of picking these guys off when some idiot in Raqqa or wherever it was that took out his phone and took a picture of the operation that they just did, and we were able to find the metadata that had location data and drop a Hellfire missile on top of them. Those are good days. But in terms of tracking this is going to make it a very difficult job for the police, for the citizenry, to tie that information from the police force to the FBI, to the NSA, to the CIA, to the military, because that entire top to bottom intelligence picture has to be, what we would call fused in order to actually find the important pieces.
And again, we want to point out what you're watching right now. Thank you, by the way. What you're watching right now, this is video coming in from Saint-Denis, France, a suburb of Paris, and we're seeing police who have cordoned off this neighborhood. This neighborhood, by the way, is close to the National Stadium, and shootings occurred there overnight when the police went in looking for suspects related to the Friday 13th massacre, terrorist attack upon so many people, innocent people, just freely going about their night, enjoying an evening in the City of Light in Paris, France. At the end of the carnage, 129 people lay dead, striking fear in the heart of Paris, France, and all over France, and the world responding and reacting in sadness, with condolences, with prayer, and 352 people wounded. And now it's time for action, and that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing action, you're seeing resolve, you're seeing a retaliation, you're seeing French forces trying to liquidate an enemy that means to harm it, and an enemy that means to topple what Paris, France is accustomed to, and that's freedom. They want to take that away. And we've been talking with some wonderful analysts and experts about this who are going to stick with us. In a few moments, we're going to go out to Paris, France with Steve Harrigan, our reporter on the ground there, and we will bring you all the resources of Fox News Channel to keep you updated on this unfolding situation, because they still believe that 3 or more suspects are still holed up in a building or in an apartment right there in that neighborhood. One woman has been killed. She was wearing a suicide belt. An innocent passerby was killed, and another man believed to be a suspect was taken out by a police sniper. And so what we're seeing right now is that police are still trying to make sure that they get those who are responsible. It had been widely reported that they might have been looking for the mastermind of the Friday 13th attacks. This entire area has been shut down as this police intervention unfolds and continues. Schools have been closed. Public buildings have been closed. The people of Paris, France, once again waking up to the shocking reality that terror is at their doorstep. But they're comforted in knowing now that police are after those who might be responsible. And we will continue to follow these developments and bring you more details as we begin our next hour here on Fox News Channel, America's most watched news.